This PowerPoint presentation will focus on the coach-athlete relationship and how the power that coaches have could lead to abused athletes. Before we discuss the coach-athlete relationship, we first must understand what it is to be an expert in coaching. Cote and Gilbert in 2009 identified three major components to be an effective coach. First was athlete's competence, and in that it dealt with the skill level of the athlete, their confidence level, whether they had connection with their coach and other players on their team, and the type of character or caring relationship that they developed. The next component was a coaching context. A coach, to be successful, needs to have certain traits within the level that they coach. In the recreation level, coaches should be people who know the basic skills, but also focus on making sports a fun and enjoyable activity. As you progress through the other levels, when a coach gets to the elite level, at that level coaches should stress more on actual outcome, sports performance, and even to the point where winning or losing is important. The next component is coaching knowledge. Coaching knowledge consists of professional knowledge, which deals with sport-specific knowledge, knowing the tactics of their sport, the technique of their sport, understanding exercise physiology, nutrition, strength and conditioning principles. And then the next one would be intrapersonal knowledge, which that has to do with the ability to reflect upon themselves and know if what they're currently doing is being successful or whether they need to change and rethink how they coach. And the last one is the one we're going to focus on mainly in this presentation, is interpersonal knowledge. Interpersonal knowledge deals with the ability to be able to work with relationships with other people. In coaching, the other people you work with could possibly be other coaches, parents, officials, but most importantly with athletes. The coach-athlete relationship is a socially constructed relationship. Within that relationship, the power is actually in the coach's hand. He or she is actually the one who controls the athletes, and in some situations even controls the parents. Some studies have shown that this relationship can be very positive. One study stressed that if the coach is caring and interacts a lot with their athletes on a positive note, that athletes actually do perform better and enjoy that relationship. Also, there were several studies that showed that if the coach gives lots of positive reinforcement, that not only does it produce a good relationship, but it also helps with athletic performance. However, from the other aspect is if negative reinforcement is used too much, that relationship between coach-athlete can be very stressful and can actually produce negative results in athletic competition. In the coach-athlete relationship, there's actually three groups involved in this relationship. Obviously, the first two are the coach and athlete. The coach is the person with the most power and authority. He dictates in many cases what the athlete can do, not only in practice but sometimes outside of practice. They will tell athletes what they can eat. In extreme cases, they will tell athletes the clothes they can wear, the hairstyle they can wear, and whether or not they can even go out on dates. The other individual is the athlete. The athlete is the person who performs in the athletic competitions. They're the ones who train all the time, but they actually have probably the least amount of say in this coach-athlete relationship. And then the third group is actually the group that's often overlooked in this relationship, but that's parents. Parents actually give up, in many cases, their parental authority over their child to a coach. In some cases, they even have the child move away from home, live with a coach, and train with a coach, with hopes that the child can become an Olympian or a national team member. Recently, we have seen examples of abusive coach-athlete relationships in the media. The most recent one was the University of Rutgers basketball coach, but prior to that was also the football coach at Texas Tech. The three types of abuse we'll be talking about is physical abuse, emotional abuse, and even sexual abuse. Physical abuse can occur when an athlete is forced to compete with an injury, and Joan Ryan, in her book Little Girls in Pretty Boxes, cited several times that U.S. gymnasts competed at international meets with either broken bones or torn ligaments. Another example of physical abuse is corporal punishment. Corporal punishment could be simple things such as push-ups or running extra laps or doing extra wind sprints. And then another example of physical abuse is actually a coach throwing objects at an athlete. Emotional abuse is when a coach maybe does excessive yelling at the athlete, makes belittling comments, name calling, degrading comments. In one case, Bela Karolyi, the U.S. national gymnastics coach, called one of his athletes a pregnant goat when she felt that this athlete was putting on some weight. And then also another form of emotional abuse is just completely ignoring the athlete. And then finally, there's sexual abuse. When this occurs, it usually makes the media or the newspapers. And in this case, most people believe that the relationship between the coach and the athlete got too close, and many feminists actually believe that the main culprit of this is really our social norms and the fact that we're in a male-dominated society. From the coach's perspective of abusive behavior, most individuals consider it the norm in sports for coaches to be very aggressive. And if we look at the quote on this slide from Coakley's book in 1998, it tells us that most people expect coaches to treat athletes in such a way that it's going to actually toughen them up for competition. So many coaches believe that this type of behavior is good for their athletes, that it motivates them, it makes them tough, it makes them more dedicated, and in many cases they believe that this is what they need in order to win. From the athlete's perspective, when a coach is being abusive, many times athletes will drop out of the sport. But also there are some negative effects as far as training effects go. Many athletes will lose motivation, they'll lose focus, and in some cases even have difficulty in acquiring new skills. There's also the psychological effects, and in many cases athletes will have anxiety, they'll have low self-esteem, which affects their performance, they'll have poor body image, and just low mood levels with not much motivation to continue in sport. And in some studies there's actually been an indication that when an athlete is abused, that they actually have negative performances in competition. From the parent's perspective, in an abusive coach situation, many of them tend to look the other way. They believe the coach knows best for their athlete or their child, and they also believe that this is what it takes to win championships. This is, as we said earlier, part of the sports culture and the norm of coaching behavior. Unfortunately, many of these parents, once interviewed after their child has retired from the sport, regret that they actually exposed their child to the type of abuse that they did, since in many cases it leads to long-term effects such as depression or eating disorders. Many of the research studies on abusive coaches offer suggestions on how to prevent that behavior. One of the suggestions is coaching education programs or being certified to coach. These programs often discuss the interpersonal relationships the coach must have and how they need to be athlete-first focused coaches. In the U.S. Olympic Committee, many of the national governing bodies of each sport have coaching education programs. Unfortunately, when analyzing these programs, very few of them have sections that deal with interpersonal skills. Most of them deal with the technical aspect of the sport and the technique aspect of the sport. Another form of prevention would be parent education. There are many organizations out there that discuss sports with parents and suggest to them things to look at in regards to abusive coaching. There are many positive experiences that come out of participating in sports, and one of those is sometimes the relationship between a coach and an athlete. And many times this is a special bond between these two people. Unfortunately, on occasion, there is coaches who abuse those relationships. Below are some organizations and resources that you could use to find out more information on abuse in sports. Thank you.